And we're back here in Africa, where clashes occurred in Freetown and other cities on August the 10th, when an economic protest descended into violence between the security forces and demonstrators. In the week following the protest, police and army convoys patrolled the busy commercial streets in the districts of Rokupa and Makeni and Kamakwie, where Freetown's protest took place. A tense calm settled, with ordinary life gradually returning. The following report takes a look at the cause of the recent protest in the country.
A country on the southwest coast of West Africa is known for its white sand beaches lining the Freetown Peninsula. Its population of 8 million people live in one of the world's poorest nations, ranking 182 out of 189 countries in the UN Human Development Index, which is a benchmark of prosperity. Sierra Leone has had a reputation for relative stability since the end of a brutal 1991 to 2002 civil war that claimed some 120,000 lives. The economy, which is heavily dependent on minerals, was devastated by the war. Efforts at rebuilding were set back by an Ebola pandemic in 2014 to 2016, a fall in the world commodity prices, and the coronavirus pandemic, all of which have disrupted trade, investment, and hit exports. Protests are usually restricted in the tiny West African country, but like many others, Sierra Leone has been badly affected by rapid inflation caused in part by the war in Ukraine. And it was the dire economic situation that brought people out to the streets. Inflation rose to almost 28% in June, followed first by the COVID pandemic easing, and then Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Food inflation is at the highest level in decades. In recent months, doctors and teachers have also gone on strike, with demands for pay increases to meet rising inflation. Anger has also been on the rise over the authorities' refusal to permit protest under the terms of Public Order Act, adopted in 1965 during colonial rule. Protest organizers usually have to ask the police for permission to protest. In July, hundreds of women working in markets protested in Freetown, condemning the government's handling of the economy. Many shops and stalls closed in support of the demonstrations. Dozens of women were arrested by police. Several alleged they had been beaten and sexually abused by officers. The government has partly blamed the opposition for the protests, branding them an attempted coup, and launching an inquiry into the alleged organizers. However, protesters interviewed by local media described their movement as faceless rather than orchestrated by one group, and reflective of widespread discontent. President Julius Bill dismissed the idea that the protests were reflective of public anger. But on the ground, it is clear that many people share the protesters' grievances.
We're keeping our eyes on the developments in Sierra Leone, and joining us on the What Now to discuss the violence disrupting that country is a former spokesperson, U.S. mission in Sierra Leone, Patrick Coker. Good to have you join us.
Good afternoon.
Now, there is a lot of agitation in Sierra Leone, and many fear that this could escalate. What is your take from, I mean, you've been in that country for years, you've also moved around that region. So what is your take from a developmental perspective, considering that the country is still recovering from a very brutal civil war?
Thank you. The situation in Sierra Leone, first and foremost, I was spokesperson for the United Nations mission in Sierra Leone. Going to the situation in the sub-region, particularly Sierra Leone, the economic situation that prevails around the world definitely has affected Sierra Leone. And most people, especially civilians, have been under the influence of this hardship. And this has resulted in protests. But when protests go beyond expressing their dissatisfaction and transition into violence, it is described as something else. The president has characterized this last protest as terrorism. especially when law enforcement officers are being murdered, cold-blood murder, burnt on the street. And it did not happen in just one place. It happened in a couple of places around the country. So it's a terrific situation. Going forward, to a large extent, the government has been able to rein in most of the disturbances and especially restored peace, as it were. This is the situation as we speak.
Not Uhuru yet in Sierra Leone. There are fears that this could continue to escalate. And considering the fact that Sierra Leone, along with neighboring countries, Liberia and Guinea, make up the Mano River countries, and when you also consider how inextricably linked they are, do you foresee an internal security crisis beyond Cameroon?
Well, first and foremost, I will agree that the three countries within the basin, we call this Mano River Basin, in Côte d'Ivoire are well linked.
I was asking you a question about how inextricably linked the Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea are, being the Mano River countries, and whether you think that this crisis could spread to those countries. And you were responding before we had that network breakdown.
Yes, thank you. The two countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, are definitely linked culturally, traditionally, and long linkages, historical linkages. Aside, we have the Mano River Union that caters to, it's a sub-regional organization that manages the affairs of these the countries within that basin: Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and now Côte d'Ivoire. Of course, the three countries, less Guinea, have been faced with a serious crisis, as it were. Now, will this extend or expand to Liberia? We cannot definitely say that now. However, recently, the president of Liberia made a statement, President George Weah, came out strongly to condemn the act of violence in Sierra Leone, of course, bearing in mind too that you have to take precautionary measures before it becomes a template for other people to use in his own country. Now, will it escalate to the level of the kind of crisis we've had in Sierra Leone? For now, I think no. As we speak, the president of Sierra Leone, President Mada Bio, has put serious measures in place. First, recently he carried out some changes in the military and the police. We have a new Inspector General of Police, and we have a new Chief of Defense Staff. And I believe those changes will go down the government structures. So I want to strongly believe that the situation is being managed.
President make in several broadcasts call for peace. Like you rightly also noted earlier, he has called these some sort of terrorism. But let me ask you, because an election is supposed to hold next year, with this level of insecurity, do you see that election holding?
Sierra Leone has really turned the corner when it comes to post-conflict development. We've had about 3 elections since the war ended in 2002. SLPP had handed over to the APC, where President Ernest Bai Koroma had his 2 terms of office. Now, President Madabio has had one term and is going for the second term. Of course, opposition parties will, contest to take over. In the process of doing this, there are political dynamics that could, result into conflict, sometimes violence. But it is most likely because a lot of institutional development have taken, reforms have taken place in Sierra Leone. They've carried out census, they've, demarcated boundaries and made sure that governance systems work. The police is being restructured and is working, the military is working. And I want to strongly believe that with what is on the ground, the election will take place, not least the fact that ECOWAS is also coming very strong. For example, ECOWAS strongly condemned the act of violence in Sierra Leone, and that resonates strongly within the sub-region amongst leadership and the followership.
We'll see how,
I want to believe that.
I'm sorry I interrupted you, but we'll see how continue to monitor developments in that country and see how things play out. Thank you so much for talking to us. The former spokesperson for UN Mission in Sierra Leone, Patrick Coker.
Thank you.